Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live stream. It's great to see so many people already here in the live stream. Loads of questions to get going with. So I'll do a couple of really quick housekeeping stuff before we get going. Just checking that the live stream's up and running. It looks like it is, which is good. So first of all, remember that this is a live stream. So if you're here live, keep posting your questions wherever it's coming up on your screen, whether it's there or down the side or wherever. And everything in this is driven by you who are watching, except for these housekeeping. If you're watching it afterwards, which many people do, thanks very much. Remember, you can skip through the questions. Now, last week I said I was only going to keep the live stream up for a couple of days. A lot of people asked me to do that longer. So what I'm going to do is every week, just before the next one goes live, I take the other one down, basically, so we have the most recent one up at all times. So as you've probably seen, many of you, I'm just back this morning from my Regal Princess cruise, a 4-night cruise, which was a great cruise, very tiring kind of cruise. It was great to meet Paul and Carol. They are in here already, so a great shout out to them. It was great to spend some time with them, which was really good to do. And they also did some little stuff with me for their channel, which will come up at some point in time. So keep an eye out for that. So subscribe to Paul and Carol. Also met a whole bunch of people who come to the live stream and stuff. So hopefully they'll join and we can give them a shout out. Also, one more quick shout out. Bob from Innocence Abroad, hello from San Diego. They are recently back from Viking, and I did see that at 6 p.m. UK time, so just after the end of this, they're going live, if I understand it correctly, with a preview, or whatever it's called, of their Viking Orion tour. So that might be something you want to stick around if you want some more stuff to watch. Right. So let's get right into, I'll get into the various questions. I'll just quickly touch on Regal Princess. It was a fantastic cruise. I think it was the second one out. Went very smoothly. The crew were very friendly, really good service. And I would say probably in the rankings of the cruises I've been on since returning to cruise, I would say it was the second. So Viking was the first, and I would say Regal Princess was the second. On Monday, so I'm just back for 2 nights. Monday, I'm heading off on Virgin Scarlet Lady, and I'm hoping that is going to go a lot smoother than when they had their first cruise yesterday. They had a bit of a interesting boarding process where people were taking between 4 to 5 hours to board because their whole testing capability wasn't really up to scratch. So hopefully they've got that sorted, and I'll let you know, and keep following me. So let's get straight into the questions. There's loads of questions. So that's fantastic. So let's get stuck right into those. And I'll sort of try and do them in kind of the order they come up. So hypnotherapy for you, Viking Celebrity Cruise is done. So I'm going on Celebrity on the 21st. I'm really looking forward to that one. Also, this could be a week long. It's going to be nice to do that. And Save the Best lost Cunard Grills suite in just over a week. Very envious because mine, as you probably know, got cancelled. Few changes to the buffet and grills dining. What do you know about these changes? I don't know very much about the changes. I have seen them sending through some stuff around booking times, but of course in the grill you have kind of open seated dining. So it's possible that they are looking at trying to get you to book a little bit more, just so that they can do more social distancing. But they certainly have been pretty coy about those changes. The buffet will be, though, I do know, it will be as, King's Court, I guess, will be as with other cruise lines where the staff are serving it. So those are the key changes. It'd be good to know if you find out any more from that. Laura, great to see you. First cruise is in November 21 at Fort Lauderdale. We've had 9 cruises cancelled so far, and I guess that's the challenge. Is we're talking about actually with Paul and Carol. Is this is kind of snowball effect. It's hard to keep pace with them cancelling. I guess where we are now with new cruises starting up is we're starting to see actually a lot of those cruises going. But as we've mentioned before many times, protocols are changing. So we've seen in the US, for example, they have brought back mask wearing, they have brought back testing. And I think one of the things that the UK and Europe cruises never did, I think I might have spoken about this last time, is they never lifted the protocols for vaccinated, unvaccinated. They basically kept the testing, they've kept the masks, and they've kept the social distancing and so on. And actually, with the Delta variant, that seems kind of fairly sensible thing to do. Thomas asks a really interesting question. I think it's a great question because I was thinking once of actually making a video around this. So maybe this is inspired. So I realize I keep trying to get rid of this little mark. I can't see it on mine, which keeps picking up reflection from the screen and stuff. Anyway, so I'll dodge that. Anyway, so Thomas is asking, why would someone choose an enclave like the Haven, I guess, or for MSC it would be like the Yacht Club versus Seabourn Regent or Silversea? Now, Thomas, I think there's an obvious answer, and there's probably a less obvious answer. The obvious answer is often it costs less, to be honest. Not always, but often it costs less depending on the itinerary. But the most critical thing, I think, maybe it's obvious, is if you're the sort of person that wants all the bells and whistles, you want the rock climbing wall, you want to be able to go to the big full-on Broadway production, where a lot of money's been spent on the show. You want to have Starbucks coffee, for example, on Norwegian. You want all of those kind of bells and whistles, the big kind of attractions, the big resort attractions. Then you would choose that, because you then have your little enclave. Like the Haven is really, really nice. You have that little enclave, you have a little sense of exclusivity, you feel a little bit pampered, with your butlers and your own private restaurants and your own swimming pool and stuff. But then you just step out and you're in a big glitzy world. So for me, it's a little bit like if you take Las Vegas, is probably the best analogy. So if you take Mandalay Bay, for example, in Las Vegas, the top 4 floors of Mandalay Bay are actually Four Seasons. So you might want to stay at the Four Seasons Hotel, where you have a much smaller swimming pool, you don't have a casino, but you literally go down to the first floor or whatever it is, you open some doors and you're into Mandalay Bay, you're into the big casino, you're into the big production show venues, all that kind of stuff. So I think that would be the absolute key reason. And you basically want a bigger ship rather than the smaller ships. So JM129, good to see you here again. I realize this is the 36th, I think on the original title, but the 35th. And I think the JM129, if you haven't been to all 36, you've probably been to like 33 of them, which is great. Thank you. With pre-cruise testing requirements by Carnival and others, so this is the thing we talk about where they've reintroduced those testing requirements. And I actually saw today they've expanded some of that testing. What are the biggest watch-outs for those cruising who've made their final payment? So a couple of watch-outs, one of which is a very, very, very practical. And assuming you've paid your final payment, you're wanting to go, and you've acknowledged that things are going to be constantly changing with the nature of the pandemic. The biggest watch out, I would say, is to understand what happens if you or your passenger either tests positive for COVID or is identified as someone who's been in close proximity. Understand line by line what that means and what the lines are going to do. So, for example, there's a very interesting article on the Royal Caribbean blog, which I think was today or maybe it was tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. God, that's very forward-thinking. Came out maybe yesterday, where he looks at real-life experiences of a couple of people who have either tested positive on a Royal Caribbean cruise or were identified as a close contact. And these were actually cruises out of Bermuda. And what's very important, for example, is Royal Caribbean have said is if you are one of their vaccinated passengers, they will cover all the medical expenses, they will cover any quarantining, and they will cover getting you home. So, for example, the passenger that tested positive, and it was only one in their party, everyone else was negative, everybody else close contacts were negative, they were taken off, they were put into quarantine on the ship, they were taken off the ship, they were given a private flight home, they were then given private transport home, and the same with the people that were identified as close contacts. The point they're making, though, is if you are unvaccinated, they do not cover those expenses. You have to have insurance covering those expenses. So that's just one example of one cruise line. So really, really important, if you are booked, is make sure, first of all, that you're comfortable that things will change, because they probably will, in either direction. Secondly, you really understand what's going to happen, because each line has slightly different policies. So, for example, here in the UK, for all of those cruises, you have to have the travel insurance that covers all those things. In the US, they're differentiating much more by vaccinated and unvaccinated at this point in time. So that's really, really important, I would say, is the watch out. The third element is also the general cancellation policy. Even though you've paid your final balances, I would brush up on what happens if for any reason you don't or can't want to go. So in the UK, for example, I don't think it's as big an issue in the US, is we have the app on our phone which tracks when you're out and about if you've come to close contact. And there's a bit, what's known here as the pingdemic, where because of Delta variant cases are rising, so many people are being told to isolate. So then understanding if you're told to isolate or whatever, what is covered and isn't covered. I think those are probably the big watch outs. If everyone else has any ideas or things that that I've maybe missed out, then let me know in the comments. Michael or Michelle, perhaps, also known as Zealand. Are Oceania R-class ship bathrooms very small? Yes. I'm 6'4". Also, any thoughts on wake concierge stateroom? Okay, so let me talk about those. So the Oceania R-class ships, for those people who don't know what I'm talking about, or what Michelle's talking about, is the R-class ships are the entire fleet of Azamara are R-class ships. And at the moment, I think it's 3 of the 5, to be 6 ships on Oceania R-class ships. These were built for Radisson 7 Seas, and then they went bust after kind of 9/11. Now, these are I like the ships a lot. They're quite old, they're quite small, but you're right. If you're going in their inside or their ocean view or their balcony cabins, the bathrooms are tiny. Now, if you want to see how tiny they are, Michelle, if you take a look, I do have actually a tour of both Azamara Pursuit, and I have a video tour of Oceania Insignia. Now, look at the most recent Oceania Insignia tour on the channel, because what they have done is they've taken up, they used to be really, really small, and they used to have plastic shower curtains, and they were awful because I'm tall, I'm 6'2". It's what I made it stick to you. What they've now done, they've actually put in glass doors, but you're right, the bathrooms are very, very, very small. So I've traveled with my partner once on Oceania, Azamara Pursuit, and actually with 2 people, the bathroom was kind of small. I've now been on by myself solo, and it's fine in terms of that size, but you're right, they are pretty small. If you want to go on an R-class ship on Oceania, if you want to go on Oceania and you're worried about that, go on their other ships. It's got Riviera and Marina, and their new ship coming soon, or book in, I think it's called a concierge suite and above, because they have bigger bathrooms and very nice. So the wake, I haven't stayed in one, but I know a few people that have. I've seen some video tours of people really, really like them. I personally am not a big fan of being at the very back of the ship. I know I'm in a minority, because I find that vibration and movement is less to my liking. I like to be in the middle of the ship, partly because it's easy to move around and about, and I just find that, I'm a little bit obsessed by noise and stuff. We were actually joking with Paul and Carol about my slight obsessions with cabins, and the fact that on these cruises we've been on, certainly on the Pinot cruise and on the Princess cruise, is you had a guaranteed cabin. You couldn't choose it. I want to give a shout out to Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Great to see you. Sarah, as many people know, is my travel agent. I think Paul and Carol called her my long-suffering travel agent or something to those effects. Maybe I'm being a little bit unkind. Maybe they didn't quite say that. Sarah's just got back from Valiant Lady, Scarlet Lady. She was on one of the shakedown cruises, and also got put in a suite, which is very, very nice. And they were on a much smaller, there was fewer people, I guess, on board, but good to see Sarah, and I'm looking forward to try and get some hints and tips from her before I head off on Monday. Heather, it's great to see you here as well. Heather, I think, is probably also one of the people who's been on almost 30-something of all of those, and Hetty's here as well. Great to see you, Hetty, real loyalists. So GJ's 347 in 11. It sounds quite military. Maybe I'm off there. Did Princess ship staff disclose any positive COVID passengers on your cruise? I've been hearing ships that small percentages have been reported, like 8 out of 1,558 on Celebrity Edge. So certainly no, we haven't seen any stats either on the ship or being released around that. And I'm not really sure on the numbers. And that doesn't seem, because I think someone might have asked me this before, maybe Hetty asked me this before, was they don't seem to be public. Or how can you get those numbers? They haven't been publicized. I mean, statistically, you would assume that they're picking up people at the beginning. So certainly what the cruise lines are doing in the UK, and I'll talk about the other regions, what they're doing, is you're getting tested before you come to the ship, and it's it's the fast test, but everyone's been tested before, which is why Scarlet Lady had the hassle later. They just didn't have enough resource to test everybody. So you had that fast test. What's happening, of course, many people like I do a test before I go to the port anyway. But statistically, with the way that the Delta variant is going, I'm sure they must pick up some people, but certainly no stats at all. The only real stats we have seen are numbers that have been picked up more in US sailings, where they're doing particularly testing, or US ships often not sailing out of the US, where they're having to do tests partway through the cruise, towards the end of the cruise, because people need a test to be able to get back into the US, where we've seen some numbers. Now, there's been a lot of discussion around those because we've seen, for example, on Carnival, they wouldn't say how many passengers were affected. So I haven't seen any data, and there certainly hasn't been any publicized data that I've seen. So no. And you know what it's like, things spread like wildfire. If there was any rumors, certainly I haven't heard any of those. Sarah's doing piles of washing. Mine's already in because I need to get it all done and ironed and ready for me heading off on Monday. Karen is asking, I just want to check it down there. Karen is asking the question, Kino have cancelled their 2022 World Cruises. Do you think MSC will follow and cancel theirs? A large proportion of MSC 2023, I guess, World Cruise consists of New Zealand and Australia. Karen, it's very interesting because I was kind of expecting to see more announcements on that. I suspect we will see in the next, where are we now? August, September, October, I think we will see it, because normally as we head out of summer and the kind of the dust settles, there's often when you also get the cruise lines launching a lot of their next kind of World Cruises coming up, for further ahead. Lots of people have been asking me around when those are going to be announced. So I think it's almost inevitable that they're going to have to either cancel them or look at alternative itineraries, because it's pretty clear, I guess, with what's happening in Australia, that its opening is going to be a real challenge. And I think we saw was it last week or the week before, the Prime Minister, it's Mr. Turnbull, I think his name, was saying that they will not open their borders until they get to 80% vaccination. I think they're currently at 20-something percent. So I guess it's quite a long way. Certainly, my nephew lives there. Our best friends live in Australia, and we were talking to them from this cruise, and we're kind of scrapped all plans of seeing them until sometime way into next year. So. So that's an opinion, and I guess we will see. Deborah, hi Deborah. I love the video of you and the penguins. I do too. What trip was that? I want to put it on my bucket list. Thanks for what you do. Deborah, that is Antarctica. So that was when I went to Antarctica, what now feels like eons ago. And it was amazing. The key thing with the penguins in Antarctica is you're briefed that you must stay, I think it was 6 feet or 9 feet away from the penguins. You mustn't get close in that. However, the penguins never got the memo, and they refuse to socially distance. They clearly haven't been through COVID, I guess, but they, even pre-COVID, they refused to socially distance. And I think what was very interesting, one of the big learnings in Antarctica was that humankind, is not seen as a threat, because so penguins are terrified. When they get in the water, their big threat is seals, and the seals' big threat is the killer whales. So once they get in the water, they're much more skittish. On land, they have no problem with people. They get very upset if you stand in their pathways. They live in the rooks, I think it's called, up on the hills, because it's quite steep in Antarctica, which I don't appreciate it. And they kind of live surprisingly high up, and they go scootling up there. And if you stand in these, they have these little pathways. And if you stand in their way, they get very upset and they'll scream at you, or they'll basically stand there and stare at you. But other than that, really, really interesting. So that's Antarctica. We were talking about Port Carriage, about Antarctica. I am desperately hoping that the world calms down enough that I will be able to go back to Antarctica in November, which I'm due to do. But it's definitely something to put on your list and start saving. Start saving. That's a good thing. Linda's asking, or mentioned that she's seen another cruise channel that Norwegian has self-service buffets. Thoughts? Now I haven't seen anyone specifically saying that they have, so maybe there are. I have seen that Norwegian Cruise Line said they want to return to self-service buffets, and I also saw Richard Fain of Royal Caribbean when he was interviewed this week. He was down, I think, in Silversea. He was at the Silversea Silver Moon naming down in Greece, and he spoke about how they do eventually want to head back to self-service buffets. Partly interesting because it takes up quite a lot of crew time to do. So I think there's probably a thing there, but I haven't seen that specifically. So I personally, I've always preferred the served buffet, and I actually quite like the served buffet. Certainly if you go on things like Continent America and stuff like they do. So Butterfly McQueen, are these British cruises allowing children on board, SOG excluded? It differs. So some are and some aren't. So many of them. So if you take a look at P&O, for example, Princess, which I was just on, and Saga by definition, they are only allowing vaccinated passengers. So you have to be vaccinated. So in the UK, up until about a week ago, only people over 18 receive vaccines. So they have now opened to over 16-year-olds. So I guess once they've been through their slots, assuming these cruises are still doing, but if they got their vaccinations 2 doses quicker, you have 2 doses in 14 days, theoretically 16-year-olds would be allowed. However, there are a couple of exceptions. So if you take a look at Disney, if you take a look at Celebrity and Royal Caribbean, they are allowing people under 18. So if you're over 18, you have to be vaccinated. If you're under 18, you can get on with testing. So in the case of Celebrity and Royal Caribbean, it's a full PCR test. So I'm going on Royal Caribbean. I've had to book a full PCR test, which they pay for, but I have to book it at one of their providers. You can do through your own provider and get refunded, where the others are doing the antigen tests. So they are allowing them, but but the parents would have to be vaccinated. So so that's good. So Bill's also here, which is great to see you again, Bill. Good to see you again. Bill's been to a lot of them as well, and a great supporter of the channel. So Yvonne, similar question, Karen, I'm due to travel with Princess on a world cruise in February 2022. Will they cancel? Good vibes. It's really like I was saying earlier. Hopefully that answered it. I mean, if you try and ask the cruise lines, they're relatively evasive, as they always are. They only tell you up until the day before it's happening. But it seems it's got an Australian leg. It's going to be challenging, and I think also a lot is going to see how this whole Delta variant plays out. That's why I'm saying, like with Antarctica, with the situation of vaccination rates and the situation, even a lot of those countries are not letting travelers in. That's your other problem. And if you've got countries still having quarantining rules, people coming in. So it just seems like a logistical nightmare. So seeing those cancellations feels inevitable. But as you say, good vibes. Professional idiot. Favorite ship that's been scrapped. I don't know that I do have a favorite ship that's scrapped. I think the ones that they were already scrapped because they got new life were the 2 ships that were sold by Holland America and went to Fred Olsen. Those were probably my favorite. The others, to be honest, a lot of the ships that got scrapped I had never been on, so I didn't really have kind of affinity with them. So, but those are the ones that I was glad to see still got a life. Pip is asking, is there such a thing as a cruise totally devoted to crafting? Please, if so, how can I find it? Now, I haven't found a 100% craft cruise. There are cruises obviously which have crafting. So Saga has craft classes, Princess have craft classes, but not totally dedicated. There used to be a really, really good site which seems to have gone, and I'll go back and check if it's re-emerged, which used to be called themedcruisefinder.com. And that's why that used to be my go-to place looking for crafting cruises. I mean, so there isn't a simple single site anymore. I mean, obviously Googling, which I'm sure you've probably done. The other thing to consider, though, is if you are a crafter, and there are some big crafting groups, is almost look at perhaps trying to encourage a big craft blogger to organize something, perhaps kind of encourage them all the crafting magazines, get that in their head, because we're seeing more and more organizations and groups organizing them, and you can get some really good deals from the cruise lines to do that. I know it's probably not an entire ship, but that's the thing to do there. Cruise Monkeys have joined, and great to see them. I saw them posted today. They were recently on Britannia. They're big P&O fans. And I think I've said before, if you're ever looking for lots of information on P&O, good one to go there. I saw them posting today. They did a ship tour of Britannia, and I think they've got 100,000 views or something now, which is fantastic. I guess one of the advantages of being strong on P&O, YouTube's encouraging. There's a lot of people out there, so take a look at that. Cruise Monkeys actually came up. We were talking to some people who follow the channel who may be in here today, and we're actually talking about you in a good way. About I was having an afternoon tea, and we're talking about what Cruise Monkeys do and their passion for cocktails and P&O. So if you watch that, here we go. I think it was Claire, if I remember correctly. Claire, it was you and I were talking about Cruise Monkeys at afternoon tea. Right back when it's lovely to meet you at afternoon tea yesterday, Claire and Paul. So that was fantastic timing right after Cruise Monkeys. So I think it was Claire and Paul. We were talking about Cruise Monkeys and the stuff that you do. So good to see you. Glad to see you got home. Hope you had a slightly less frantic ride home than I did, where the train was absolutely gone. Lots of love for Gavin and Luke. So let's have a look. So we've got loads of people. Yes, so Bob confirming Viking Orion ship tour. So just after this on his channel. So the lone cruiser. Hope you're well. Yes, I am a little bit tired from the cruise. Getting ready for Scarlet Lady to see what's going to be his party as everyone thinks it might be. Anyway, just wondering if you have any information on or experiences with Crystal River cruises, as they don't appear to be mentioned in any of your river cruise videos. Really, really good point. The most frustrating thing about Crystal is I have had opportunities to go on them a couple of times which have fallen through. So I was originally once asked by Crystal to go on a Crystal cruise a couple of years ago. And of course I said yes at that time. There's a whole separate discussion about going on press trips, which I'll cover another time. But and then it was selling so well that fell through. Then I was supposed to go last year. We know what happened. And now actually they are just so full. So I haven't actually been on a Crystal River cruise. However, I have met quite a few people who have, and I've also spoken to some people who work on Crystal River cruises. I met them. So that's part of the reason they're not there, because I haven't really been able to talk from a first-hand experience about Crystal River cruises. There was a lot of speculation about the future of Crystal River cruises about a month ago, 6 to 8 weeks ago, when all their ships appeared via a broker for sale. Crystal eventually came back and said that's not true. It was someone speculatively. So there was a little bit of uncertainty there, but certainly they seem to be back in their stride. Certainly when I've looked at Crystal River cruises and looked at booking them, they are definitely on the expensive side, but anyone who's been on Crystal will know that the service is phenomenal, the food is phenomenal, the ships are very beautiful. I've only looked in the ship, I haven't cruised on it, so that's the reason they're not in there. But certainly everyone who's been on Crystal has spoken extremely highly of them, and people have sort of had a toss. I've been on Uniworld, which is the closest to Crystal. I think Uniworld is kind of nudging towards the Crystal area. So if anyone else has been on Crystal, then please shout. That's the reason. Sarah Sup saying interested to hear thoughts. So hopefully I've answered that. Okay, this is an interesting one because this actually affects, if I'm right in saying, it affects Sarah, Travel Agent Sarah, as I call her. Love your channel, which is great to hear. Question: with some Schengen region countries not recognizing the Indian-made AstraZeneca vaccine, how does it affect cruises when a ship docks in these ports? From Tia. So just to explain that, so basically with AstraZeneca, just let me explain for people what it is. So with AstraZeneca, most of the vaccines that you use, certainly in the UK, were made either in plants in Europe, which caused a whole big fight for the EU at one point, over supply issues, or in the UK. But they did have a plant in India which made some of the vaccines. So some people received very specific batches from India, and there's about 4 or 5 numbers, if I remember correctly. And I know Sarah is one of the people that has that. So what originally happened was the EU, through their equivalent of the FDA or whatever the equivalent, or CDC or whatever equivalent that approves drugs, the way it works is they have to approve each factory individually, and they hadn't approved the Indian one. So it's not so much that they had issues with the actual quality of it, it's just that it had never been approved. So it became a bit of a hot topic, and some countries have accepted. So Malta, for example, which is was quite popular at one point because it was on the green, what's it called, the green route for travel, so you didn't have to quarantine, etc. They didn't accept it, and they did accept it, and they didn't. So at the moment, it's a little bit of a patchwork. So at the moment, because up until recently, international cruising wasn't allowed by UK people, so that they didn't have insurance anyway. So it hadn't really become an issue. So in terms of what's happening is, I think we're seeing mixed views. So certainly, the only thing I would say is if people have the Indian variants, and they know they have an Indian variants, the first thing they need to do is check extremely carefully with what the existing requirements are, and probably have a discussion with the cruise lines, because I think you'll probably find that getting off the ship will be an issue, but I don't know that for certain. But it's a really good watch out, is if you have that and you're planning to go cruising outside of the UK or anywhere in Europe, you absolutely need to check. And importantly, like we said before, this keeps changing. So Malta one day wouldn't accept it, the next day they would accept it, and so on. This whole AstraZeneca vaccine issue, of course, is one we're all waiting to see what happens as the US reopens. Anyway, Sarah is saying Interested to hear your thoughts on Virgin afterwards. I'm very, very, very interested to come see Virgin. I went on, I think some of you know, on one of the one-nighters when it first came out of the port, but you can't, it was a real shakedown because you couldn't really tell it. So I'm very, very interested, very, very interested to see. Alan, sort of linked to that point, this is very timely as well. This is coming up nice and ordered. So very timely. Alan's asking, we've heard of long queues to get tested for P&O at Southampton. What's your experience? So Alan, you're absolutely right. So we've seen the situation in Portsmouth with Scarlet Lady, where hopefully that's got sorted. That was a really supply issue, not having enough people by the sounds of it. But you're right, I've seen a couple of people who have been driving to join the cruise have an issue where they've been waiting for an hour or so. And David, who's the Cruise Show UK, who's not here because he's actually on Virgin at the moment, he actually posted a video about it. And I have had a few other people contact me saying they'd had issues. The issues seem to have been more with the drive-through process. My experience was it was incredibly quick. I had come, I got dropped off, and then I literally did the walkthrough one, and that was incredibly quick, maybe because there was fewer people doing it. So I found it very, very quick indeed. Now, what I've been watching today is P&O Iona, which is their new big mega ship. So P&O Iona is basically Carnival Mardi Gras. It's the same ship, but obviously it's branded P&O and some few bits and pieces inside are different. But they had their maiden voyage today, and there's a lot of people heading down there. I don't know what exact capacity they're selling, but even if it's 50% capacity, it's a lot of people. So I'm keeping, and they're going for the same cruise terminal with the same drive-through process, the same walk-through process. So I've been keeping an eye on that. I haven't seen anyone posting about long delays yet, but certainly it was an issue, and maybe it's been sort of because there was a lot of people shouting about it. But my experience was really smooth. It was, the Princess was probably a little bit faster, but we're talking more like I literally had to wait for 3 people having, when I did the P&O one, there was maybe 4 people in front of me just having their documentation checked, the vaccination documentation. Then I was through queuing, test, that took 10 minutes maybe. Obviously then wait 20 minutes for the results. The Princess one was even quicker than that. So I guess this coming back, people call me Craig. This is Norwegian seems to be making its way to Alaska without any issues. Not good. I'm booked for the last week in September. Hopefully protocols don't need to change by then. So yes, so the Alaska stuff is happening. We have seen the lines, point to watch out, changing. I don't know if you saw, probably this, I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about, but the very unfortunate accident in Alaska at the beginning of the season, there was 5 passengers from off Norwegian, off Holland America, New Amsterdam were killed on an excursion in Alaska. They had booked a float plane excursion, not through the cruise line. And unfortunately that crashed. So it was quite a sad process. It was covered a little bit, but I knew 1 or 2 people, sort of not know them that well, who were on that. So that was quite sad. I guess that's also gets the importance, I guess, of always checking, very carefully when you're going on excursions, reviews and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of sad. So Joel, what is the status of Americans going on river cruises? Certainly, and are they saying, would you recommend waiting? So Joel, I assume you're talking about Americans coming to Europe. As you probably know or allude to, is it's now possible for vaccinated Americans to enter Europe and now also to enter the UK without having quarantine. There are various restrictions and rules around testing, and they differ a little bit by country. So, and they, as you said before, and they keep changing. So that's the first thing, is just making, navigating through all of that. So the river cruises, they're starting up patchily. They are starting up around the place, and they are accepting international travelers. So, you absolutely, if it's sailing and you can, excuse the pun, navigate, just make sure you're navigating those rules, because you don't have to do the quarantining, then you can absolutely go. Would you recommend waiting? Again, a lot of it depends on whether you are comfortable traveling internationally, I would say. So, I tend to be on the more cautious side in terms of international cruising. I'm not, and traveling internationally, partly because it's just the nightmare of coming in and out with the rules changing in the UK. So I would say overall, they are, we're seeing, as in the US, everywhere, the Delta variant growing very fast. What we are seeing, though, in Europe, which is also really important to understand, is a number of countries, of which Germany is about to become one, France is definitely one, and Italy is definitely one, is they have introduced what they call the green passport, where entry into some things, including in some countries, trains, restaurants, shopping centers, you have to have proof of this e-passport thing that you've been vaccinated before you can enter some of the things. So also very important to just make sure that if you are planning to come, you understand those rules. So it's a law in France, it's a law in Italy, and Germany is talking about it as well. And that will definitely affect river cruising if you're out and about, because you will have to have, you can actually get into the e-passport thing. So it's very important to just understand the process of getting into the EU, and then also the restrictions, which are changing very, very fast. So there you go. Hopefully that helps. I don't know if I answered your question directly. I guess I say be cautious. B stands. What was the best part of Princess for you? Ooh, that's very interesting. Very, very interesting question. You know, I think probably the best part for me is I actually really like the ship, and I had a very nice cabin. Now, those of you who probably know is with the return to cruising, I decided I was going to really go crazy, partly because we're doing they're around UK ones. It's UK summer, and we're not having a particularly good summer, lousy weather. So actually, instead of traveling in the balcony cabin, which would be my preference, and because we could get some nifty pricing often, thank you, Sarah, I booked suites, etc. So the cabin I had, or the suite that I had, was really, really nice, and I've done a tour of it, and I posted some pictures of that as well. In fact, I've done a YouTube short of it. So I actually really like the ship, and it's very interesting, stands, because it's exactly the same ship as Britannia, which I was less keen on. There's something about the way that Princess have used that ship. So the atrium area, they've turned it into this real buzzy vibe thing. So you've got the gelato there, you've got International Cafe, you've got Alfredo's Pizzeria, you've got some shops, you've got really the casinos just off it, you've got the seafood bar, then you've got on each level there's kind of all the stuff going on, and there's no matter what time you go there's always kind of an energy and a buzz around the place. So the ship feels very buzzy without being crazy busy. There's a real energy about it. So I would say that's probably it. I think so. The ship itself, I just love. I love that, the decor and stuff. And I think the service, I think the crew were really good. The crews on so many of these return to cruises have not, I guess it's challenging. They're coming back and getting into process. But I would say probably those things. I would say on Princess, if you're going to ask me my least, lower down the list would be, is I would say from a food perspective, I think the food on Princess is fine. I think it's not going to set the water alight, and that's maybe a function of they're kind of they're premium, but they're sort of they're similar food to their competitors, Britannia, P&O, etc. So I would say that's kind of middle range. Is there anything I didn't like? So I'm going further in your question. The thing I was less keen on is the shows. On the ship they had the two shows, which is like a Souls one, and then they have sort of a more classical one. For me, the shows are still so dated. I mean, they use modern technology, but I still feel cruise ships is my bugbear. Cruise ships, they do those review shows, and they're just so similar and so the same. So that's probably the ranking of those. So let me answer Randy's question. So I'm going to have a cup of tea. But it's a really good question, Randy, because this is a little bit what I was alluding to. So I'm wondering if the crew is experienced, or with a lot of new and inexperienced crew members who are worried about bad service. So Randy, what I've seen on all the ones that I've been is in most cases, the crew themselves were pretty experienced. And I guess, as ships return to service, the cruise lines have been able to focus on bringing back people with real experience. And I guess also, certainly the crew had been working on ships for a while. What was interesting, though, is a lot of the crew have changed cruise lines. And I guess the nature of, as jobs came along, they would go for a new cruise line. So you're right. Certainly I did see in some of the earlier cruises that perhaps people were not as familiar. So on Saga, for example, they weren't as familiar with the Saga brand. I think on P&O, perhaps some of them weren't as familiar with the systems and the process. So they didn't know, like when you would go to the restaurant, the main dining room, they didn't actually know where the tables were. They'd say table 200, and they were like, they'd be wandering around, you having fun at the table. So I think obviously as this goes back, it'll settle down. So certainly I think they brought a very experienced crew. Were they familiar always with the ship or the line? Not always. So I think the service has been, like I said, on Viking was amazing service. They were incredibly well trained. I would say on Princess, they've done an incredible job at getting the staff and the crew up to speed. So certainly, but I think it's a really good watch out, and that was a good that was a good link. So Udan asked this question, Udayan, I hope I pronounced it correctly, from Bombay. Please suggest cheap and best 15 days cruise for 2022. I've been to an Alaska cruise and a Baltic cruise. Udan, if you're looking for something that's cheap, by which I guess value, focus on the Caribbean and focus on the Mediterranean, because you're always going to have the most amount of lines operating there, and you're also going to have a wide range of prices. So those are probably the areas to focus, and you can do those 15-day cruises. In the Caribbean, you can do great cruise, which will go right down to the Southern Caribbean, or you can do one which includes part transitions of the Panama Canal. So not necessarily just those things. You can do a great 2-week cruise around the Mediterranean, say out of Southampton. They do a lot of 2-week cruises around the Med, but lots of those others will do it. If you're looking for then specifically the cruise lines to focus on is MSC Cruises, you always get really good prices. Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, those kind of cruise lines would be the ones to focus on. So those are the ones that I would focus on. The other thing to do is, if you're not so focused on the destination, is you're always going to get great deals on repositioning cruises. So, and again, a lot of those will be sort of 2 weeks, but you're going to have a lot of sea days. But so around the sort of March, April time, when the ships kind of head from the Caribbean across to Europe, or sort of September, October time when they head back from Europe to the Caribbean. So normally they will do a couple of days in the Caribbean, a couple of islands. They'll cross to Madeira or the Azores or somewhere, maybe 1 or 2 stops in Europe. So those you'll often get really good deals. So Beth making the point, actually, just linking back to the point that Thomas was raising around why would you choose, say, the Haven on Norwegian versus, say, just on Silversea. I think you're right. There is a little bit of that sort of the suite class of the ship was in the ship class point. So that's probably important. So let's have a look. Heather making the point about masks and testing. The thing with testing is, Heather, the thing with the testing, you're right. I mean, most of the testing, with the exception really of Viking, is the up the nose test, not the throat test. They're only the nose test. Viking are using the spit test, but you're right. All the others, I guess, there's also a cost. There's also, I guess, a cost element to that as well. So Claudia is asking, linked to that mask question, is what's the mask for Sky Princess? We booked for the Bahamas at the end of November. At this point in time, Claudia, we don't know the answer to that. We don't know. Certainly, if you look at their protocols, all the protocols talk about things like masks, etc., etc., etc. However, as we've seen, these policies are becoming more and more differentiated by region, and they're driven by the country that you're selling out of, as well as the countries you're calling on. So you'll see increasingly, for example, people posting around how, like some of the Alaska cruises. So, for example, Eat Sleep Cruise. If you look at their review recently, they were on Majestic Princess, I think it was, in Alaska, and their point was saying, because it was a vaccinated cruise, they didn't have to wear masks at that point in time on the ship, but when they got off in certain ports, they had to wear a mask because that was the rule. Then we saw, for example, Norwegians sailing out of Greece. They had originally said there wouldn't be any masks, but when people got on the ship, they were told they had to wear masks because Greece had changed the rule and was required to wear masks. So it's really hard to say. So certainly at this point in time, we don't know, and it will depend a lot on what the rules are. Now, I'm guessing you're probably sailing out of Fort Lauderdale for that one. I'm guessing. So we don't know, and again, things keep changing and watching it. So Jeffrey saying, I've said Four Seasons Las Vegas, it's very nice. I agree. We've said that a couple of times. It's very, very nice a place to stay, and it's great. So Beth asking a question: how do you feel about cruise lines starting with only vax passengers and crew, and then changing to permitted unvaxxed on board? So this obviously is always a minefield of question. To answer my personal view, based on what I've done, is I have only booked cruises and going on cruises at this point in time, which with adults have to be vaccinated. I even was nervous originally about going on those where under 18s could go that weren't vaccinated. I think what the cruise lines are saying, and you might have seen this, Norwegian Cruise Line are actually taking the Florida state to court to get the rule which the governor has put in place, not allowing them to check and ensure that they only sail with vaccinated passengers, ruled illegal or dangerous or something like that. So certainly the cruise lines definitely, if you hear Richard Fain talking, if you hear Frank Rio from Norwegian talking, and they definitely prefer to go with vaccinated passengers. And they say it in different ways. Some of them talk about we encourage people to be vaccinated. If they have a choice, they go with vaccinated passengers because the risk, I think, is so enormous of something going wrong. As we've seen, of course, is one of the learnings we're getting against people with Delta variant can still get infected anyway. So that creates a whole other complication. So certainly, I feel like it's, we've got to be hyper cautious with cruise lines as they head back, because cruises only really work if you can call on ports, and people are only going to let people call on ports if they are comfortable that it's safe both for their residents and it's safe, it's not going to overwhelm, etc. So to me, it just feels like the right thing to do for now, basically. I mean, the cruise lines feel so strongly about it, they are making it very difficult, where they are, like the ones out of Florida, it costs you more if you're an unvaccinated passenger because you have to do the tests. I was talking earlier, you might have, I don't know if you were there when I was talking about it, but with Royal Caribbean they will cover costs if you test positive or exposed one of the close contacts for vaccinated passengers. If you're unvaccinated, you have to have your insurance and they will not cover it. So there's all those kind of things because they, I think, see it as just being really, really, really critical from that perspective. So Heather, just picking up on that point, if you test positive on Royal Caribbean, what would happen if I test positive, my kiss is negative? So basically what's happening if, Heather, take a look at that article, it's interesting that they did the whole group. So what happened is the whole unit that was together was disembarked and sent home as a group. So that was what happened. So they originally quarantined everybody, did the tests, etc. As a unit kind of thing. So they deal with people as a traveling unit. So don't. Jeff making the point, check if your insurance has COVID codes. That's really absolutely important. Bill asking the question, what happens, how Viking handled it? Happened with it, because you're right, it happened with one of their cruises in Iceland, and it was a relatively similar process. They handled it slightly differently, only because no, that's not quite true actually. They didn't, because I'm trying to remember, he tested positive because there was two incidents, one which was in one of the Bermuda cruises and one was in the Iceland cruise. So maybe talk about it was both slightly differently, although similar one. Basically what they did is the people were taken off the ship and put into quarantining as was required, and that cost was covered. Now, on one of the other cruises, I'm just trying to remember the exact details, is everybody was tested and it was fine in the end. And only the person that was infected was taken off the ship and quarantined. So it's kind of a similar process, but they returning to quarantine in the place where it happened, if you like. So bringing out to the point, it's really, really important to check very specifically what is going to happen. Mike saying, welcome to Sydney. I'm trying to think what time it is in Sydney. I'm very early or very late from the non-cruise capital, Sydney. Yeah, that's a real tough one, Sydney. And I saw today, Sydney's in New South Wales in big lockdown. Our really good friends live in New South Wales. I think you're into week 6 of lockdown, but yesterday was again record number of cases. So it looks like a long haul. So let's have a look. John asking the question: are you booked to go on Iona this summer? No, I'm not. Iona's, I prefer smaller ships. Iona is a little bit on the big side for me, and also when it really came out, I was still nervous about just the numbers of people. And I like the idea when, even if it's only 50% capacity, it's a lot of people. Although I haven't been on cruises now and seeing how the whole distancing is being managed, I probably less so. So I haven't booked on Iona, and I have no time now because things like P&O, Princess, Celebrity, I think Celebrity is the one, you have to have 7 days in between cruises. So for example, I am going on Virgin on Monday after only 2 nights off because they don't have the 7-day rule. But most of the cruise lines are requiring you to have at least 7 days in between cruises, I guess. So if anything happens and you have to quarantine or isolate, or in some cases, like with Celebrity, you have to have a couple of days to have to do the testing. So I've run out of time, but there's a lot of people on, so I'm sure there's going to be lots and lots and lots of coverage, and it's going to be very, very, very thing. Jenna's asking, how can we contact which agency do you work for? So I'll answer that question. So in terms of Sarah works for a company called Travel Counselors, which I think they're sort of semi-independent, if I'm right in saying that. So they work from home. And actually, if you take a look on my website, Ginger Nightmare, if you take a look at my website, tipsfortravelers.com, and you look on there, there's a thing called Cruise With Me, and I list all my cruises. And I've actually put links to Sarah's details there, and just to in the spirit of openness, whatever. I have no relationship with Sarah, so you use Sarah kind of your own volition, as it were. But but I have no relationship with Sarah, so if you use her, I don't get anything other from it. So I just want to know that I know some of the bloggers or vloggers have relationships with travel agents where they have reference fees or commissions or whatever. I don't have any of that relationship with Sarah. I prefer not to do that. So so have a look there. I'm sure probably if you Googled Sarah, you might find her as well. But Sarah's been great, so I'm very happy to recommend her. So let's have a look here. Cruise only, but with reservations, airlines, hotel cruises at 100% refundable transfer for any reason. I think I probably missed a question there, so I'll have a look. Let me answer this one. Meantime, while I'll go back and have a look at that. So, Robin H, how are you looking forward to your Virgin cruise on Monday after last night's debacle? Robin, I have before yesterday, and I'll come back to that in a second again, is I have lots of reservations about going on Virgin, which is one of the reasons I'm looking forward to going on Virgin, because to see what it's really like when you're out cruising. I mean, they've made a lot of noise around how they are different, and it's going to be interesting to see how different they really are in practice once you're on there. And I'm particularly interested to see who the passenger mix is. So I'm really interested to see that. I'm also interested to see, spending longer than just one night in the cabins, how they go. So I'm really looking forward to, with a degree of apprehension and lots of question marks. I'm particularly was particularly concerned about the whole 4 or 5 hours to get on board. What I'm hoping and I'm guessing is, because bear in mind you had Tom McAlpine, who is the CEO of Virgin, was on the ship yesterday. You had media covering it like crazy, and it's definitely not the sort of news that they wanted. Also, the testing partner had put out this big release on Twitter about, isn't this wonderful that we're a partner? So I'm guessing, and it's cost them a lot of money. They gave everybody on the ship free drinks all night. They gave everybody on the ship, each passenger, $200 onboard credit. So this has also cost them enormously. So I'm guessing that over this weekend, there's going to be a lot of head banging and shaking and whatever happens to make it work. So I'm hoping that something will have been done to significantly improve that. So that I'm hoping that's going to be the case. The thing though that I think is going to be interesting is how the whole app process hasn't really worked terribly well. And especially things like you don't have a main dining room, for example, and you need to make all your reservations as 20. I can't remember how many different places to eat. And so it's all around booking your dinner every night, but the app doesn't really work. So I haven't been able to do that. I think I have one reservation, and I've had messages to them saying book your dinner, but I can't do it. And then following some people on Twitter, they've also had some issues with getting that tech to work. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all kind of nets out. So I'm kind of a little bit apprehensive, but kind of intrigued at the same time. So we'll see how that all goes. So thanks very much to Theotherapist 3.0 with the super chat or whatever it's called. So the model behind me, I get asked often quite. I have this one, which is Queen Mary 2, and I also have one QE2. I got them maybe about a decade ago through someone on eBay, and they weren't that expensive at the time. I can't remember how much they were, but unfortunately, the guy who did them found out has kind of passed away and stuff, and so they aren't available. And I've been looking for those because I get asked a lot around those, and finding them. But if I ever find them or anyone else finds them, then definitely let me know, because I get a lot of people asking around those. Kathy raising the point that that around the AstraZeneca. So the issue here, which Kathy's raising, which is a big issue at the moment and hasn't been resolved as of yet, is a lot of the cruise lines in the US introduced a policy where they didn't accept mixing doses as being fully vaccinated. You were going to be treated as unvaccinated. So if you had an AstraZeneca or a Pfizer or an AstraZeneca and a Moderna, they didn't accept it. And there's been lots of discussion, but it's still the case. And you're right, a lot of Canadians are very concerned, because if and when things start moving, because like the Canadians are still not allowed in the US, as we are not allowed from the EU, that there's going to be a struggle to get on cruises counters of vaccination. So hopefully that gets resolved. I think there may be a few people in the UK that had that. I think there's people in Denmark or something that had it, but that's going to be an issue. So definitely one that's going to be resolved, and one to watch. And I guess when the US eventually decides to open borders, that's going to be a very live issue. Mark saying, hope to see you on Celebrity Silhouette on the 21st of August. Love you, channel. Great advice. So Mark, it'd be great to see you. One of the things that's been fantastic on all these cruises, I've met so many people that watch the channel. The hard part is often, as you know, you're seeing that much of them, and so often I don't know what they look like. And so when someone says, "Are you Gary?" you never quite know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. But it's been fantastic to me. So definitely, if you see me around, please to give me a shout. That will be great. So Bob just confirming that they thing about the US people flying, which Bob and Holly are doing, is confirmed that their October the 13th river cruise is that's great to know. Let's have a look. So lots of people talking about the Australian situation. Jody, supposed to start Australia in April 2022. We booked 2 times. It's like the Australian thing is very, very difficult. Mike picking up on the point of asking about the service. So great, thanks for adding that. The cruise in June was amazing. Mardi Gras, some were good. Many were very nervous in the main ending. I've seen the same thing. I guess Mardi Gras, brand new ships. So also they're learning maybe the cruise line and the ship, and they perhaps haven't been able to do as many shakedown cruises in the past. So again, I've seen a little bit of a mix on that, but hopefully that really comes right soon. So let's have a quick look. I want to make sure that there's anything really pressing that I have missed. Let's have a look. Sarah's put her details there if anyone's asking. Someone's saying, Ginger saying there's a kit on eBay that's similar. There was a kit one which I looked, and maybe there was one I looked at once and it wasn't as good. So if that is the one, just have a look at that. So Katie, also talking about the poster. This is my study, so I don't have all the full wall of posters I do in my studio. This poster, this poster here, it was surprisingly inexpensive. This is one that I actually bought online, and I got it. I'm trying to remember the name of the company, but I basically Googled, to be honest, I just Googled cruise liner posters, and it came up, and it was not Etsy, but it was something like Etsy. They might come to me in a second, but actually you'll find this poster on quite a lot of sites, and it was at one point on Amazon as well, and you can buy it framed and unframed. But I often like to buy them on the ship. So the ones that I have in my sort of studio, that's more the ones that are on ships, and they tend to have those tend to be more limited print runs, so they might have them for a year or 2 or so. So that's that's something worth knowing. Right. Well, so much time has gone by, and hopefully I have answered most people's questions. Let me just answer this one. Ken asking, do you think the CDC November 1st date is still good for use cruises over 7 days? I think it certainly, they have made no mention that they're planning to push, the conditional sailing order past it. As you know, there's an ongoing battle between Florida and the CDC around the rules. The cruise lines are all saying, look, we're accepting all the CDC guidelines anyway. I think it's almost inevitable that we'll see that, lifting. The cruise lines, if you look at what they're doing, they're selling cruises longer than that, and I think they are pretty confident it's going to happen. And I think, so I think it's what I've been looking at, and what I've certainly done. I've been booking cruises quite early into next year that are in the US that are longer than seven nights. The big thing we're going to watch, which a lot of people have contacted me about, is the repositioning cruises in October and November time, because a lot of those are over 7 nights, and people are waiting to get final confirmation, because a lot of them are arriving on like the 1st, the 2nd, etc. So at the moment, the cruise lines are still selling those and still making those available. So I think that's probably people are feeling pretty confident about those. Wow, so now it's gone by. I hope I've answered your question. I'm sure I probably missed some of those. Thanks so much for joining. Next week, I will have, on a Saturday, we will do another live stream where I will be able to talk much more around what I thought, my initial thoughts about Virgin. Obviously, we'll be doing a whole video in much more detail, but certainly next week I will talk much more around that. So have a great rest of the weekend. As I mentioned, at 6 or about now, you've got Bob and Holly's Viking Orion. I will have another video up tomorrow, which will be some stuff around, I think it's Saga or Britannia, I can't remember that. So keep a lookout for that. So thanks very much. Have a great rest of the weekend. And I really, really, really appreciate everyone joining me. Take care, and happy sailing if you're joining me next week.